Welcome back. My name is Martin Becher, and today we will talk about an introduction to climate risk assessments for infrastructure projects. And for this, let's briefly review what climate risk is, meaning the terminology that we learned already in a previous video. We have risk in the middle. Risk is what interests us, and risk is always determined by the hazards that we are analyzing, meaning hazards derived from climate change signals. And it's also determined by exposure. Exposure meaning if my system of interest, which I am currently analyzing, is exposed to the hazards. Also, it relates to vulnerability, both sensitivity and adaptive capacity. And when my system of interest is exposed to a likely hazard and is also vulnerable, then we have a climate-related risk. And what actually are we making risk assessments for? Well, there are several purposes, of course, being the most important one or the most obvious one to identify potential impacts in determining the risk level for a certain system of interest. Also to understand which people, places, sectors will be most affected by current and future impacts, and to identify also underlying causes for risk, meaning sensitivities or lack of adaptive capacities, or also exposure of certain parts of our system of interest. We may need the results of a risk assessment to design adaptation policies, to monitor our adaptation policy, meaning to see if the risk has evolved over time or not. Also to raise awareness and sensitize about climate change and its related impacts. And last but not least, another purpose might be to conduct scientific research. And of course, risk assessments can be performed in different steps of the infrastructure investment project cycle. For instance, when we design sector policy plans and regulations, when we are in the project identification phase, and especially in the project preparation phase, in order to prepare our project in a way that climate-related risks are reduced. It's also important in the resource mobilization step in order to assess potential risks and maybe think about the potential need in the risk treatment of an insurance. Also, of course, in the construction step, mainly in moments like in dams where constructions take several years, to take into account potential extreme hazard events. And of course, also in operation and maintenance, if we have an infrastructure that is supposed to last for several decades, to take into consideration both current and future climate-related risks. Before carrying out a risk assessment, there are certain key questions to be answered. The first one is why. So why are we actually performing this risk assessment? What is the objective? Is it just to climate risk infrastructure investment? Is it for a policy? Is it to sensitize people? Is it for scientific reasons? And also related to that, how will the result be used? Is it to sensitize people? Then I need another type of result. Then, for instance, in order to revise construction design. Second question is where. So where and what is the system of analysis or system of interest? Is it a watershed or maybe only a bridge within the watershed, or all infrastructure within a political administration unit? Who and what are the units of analysis? Who will be the beneficiaries? Communities, sectors? And to what are we actually conducting this assessment? So which climate parameters are we analyzing? So onset hazards, or the increased frequency in storms, or increase of heat waves? Try to be specific with regards to that. And last but not least, when? What is the time horizon? And here it's quite important also to assess how long we are supposed to use the infrastructure we are assessing. Is it 30 years, 50 years, 100 years maybe for neighborhoods? These are important steps to take into consideration. Other key considerations in climate risk assessments are, for instance, complexity. It means that assessment always deal with complex socio-ecological systems and inherent interlinkages. It means that we need to take this into account and maybe pick key issues of these socio-ecological systems in order to perform our assessment. And we need to pick wisely. It's also clear that risk assessments are never the same. There is no one fits all solution. It depends very much on the available resources regarding time, finances, and human resources that we have in place in order to conduct this, and what our result is supposed to display. Of course, also the result will strongly depend on related data and information. If we work in a region where climate-related data, climate services are not as accurate as others, we cannot expect the same results. It's always also quite important to keep our credibility. Of course, often we are in a hurry, we need to have rapid results, but we also need to be pragmatic and see if we do have the needed knowledge and skills in place, or if we do need to invest a little bit in external expertise and maybe additional time in order to generate credible results. And last but not least, we always need to deal with uncertainties. We are looking into the future. As we learned before, we do not know for sure how the future will look like, both regarding socioeconomic development, but also regarding climate-related changes. So we have to work with assumptions, we have to do our best, but uncertainties will always remain. Finally, once you've done a climate risk assessment, try to repeat it regularly or at least revise it. There are always new outcomes, new evolutions, new information coming in, which might help you to make your assessment more accurate. And by repeating the exercise several times, you might be able also to monitor whether your risk is increasing or decreasing. That's it for now. Thank you so much for your attention, and talk to you soon again. Goodbye.